My name is Daniel Mercer, and for 29 years I have lived in the shadow of my sister, Isabella. The divide between us wasn't measured in words, but in moments, birthdays, graduations, even Christmas mornings. Every memory seemed to tilt in her favor, as though our parents had silently declared her the golden child, while I was merely an afterthought. But it all crystallized on one humiliating evening that began with a cupcake. 3 weeks earlier, Isabella's 26th birthday had been nothing short of a spectacle. My parents rented a rooftop lounge downtown, complete with champagne fountains, velvet ropes, and a live jazz quartet playing under strings of golden lights. A professional photographer captured her every smile, every pose in her designer dress, and at the climax of the night, they presented her with a Rolex wrapped in Tiffany blue paper, a $15,000 watch. They toasted her brilliance, her beauty, her bright future, while the entire city skyline became her backdrop. And then came my birthday. A smudged cupcake from a grocery store bakery box sat in the center of our dimly lit kitchen table. Beside it, a cheap gas station greeting card with a cartoon dog on the front. I opened it, trying to suppress the flicker of dread in my chest. The words inside weren't warm wishes or encouragement. They were a dagger disguised as a joke. Congrats on wasting another year. The silence was louder than any celebration. My father, Richard, barely lowered his newspaper, muttering something about not making a fuss. My mother, Elaine, smiled expectantly, waiting for me to laugh at what she considered clever humor. Isabella scrolled through her phone, likely posting yet another photo of her Rolex to her hundreds of followers. I stared at that card until the letters blurred. 29 years of being overlooked surged inside me, the forgotten school plays, the graduation they left early, the Christmas mornings when Isabella's mountain of gifts towered over my modest pile. It all sharpened into this single cruel moment. When my laugh never came, Elaine's smile cracked into irritation. Relax, Daniel, it's just a joke unless you're still sensitive about everything. That word still struck deeper than the card itself. It wasn't just dismissal, it was accusation, as if the flaw was mine, not theirs. But instead of exploding, something inside me settled into a cold, clear calm. I pulled out my phone and framed the scene. The sad cupcake with its crooked candle, the cruel card, the empty chairs. A pathetic birthday tableau. I clicked the shutter. Then, without a word, I pocketed the phone, stood up, and walked out. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the image. I scrolled back through the dozens of photos from Isabella's rooftop celebration. Plastered all over social media, the contrast was so obscene it could have been staged, like someone had made a before and after slideshow of favoritism. That's when an idea took hold. A dangerous, liberating idea. I created a side-by-side collage. On the left, Isabella's glittering rooftop party, glowing with joy and extravagance. On the right, my lonely table with its single cupcake and sarcastic card. For the caption, I wrote, "Same parents, different priorities. Spot the favorite child." I tagged everyone, family, friends, acquaintances. Then with one final breath, I posted it across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn. No rant, no pleading, just the evidence. Then I shut my phone off, the silence of my apartment pressing in. I didn't know it yet, but that single photograph would detonate like a bomb. By morning, the Mercer family name would be on every relative's tongue, and decades of carefully maintained illusions would begin to crumble. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, it was like unleashing a tidal wave. Notifications flooded in so quickly, the screen froze, hundreds of comments, shares, and private messages. Some were from friends who had quietly suspected the favoritism all along. Others were from strangers, people I had never met, who saw their own pain reflected in my side-by-side post. "Same story in my family," one woman wrote. "Thank you for saying what I never could." But sympathy wasn't universal. "By noon, my cousin Ava was blowing up my phone. Her voice shook with fury when I finally answered. 'Daniel, what did you do? Do you realize how humiliating this is for Aunt Elaine and Uncle Richard? You're trying to destroy the family.' Destroy the family!" The words tasted bitter. I had lived nearly 3 decades, invisible in my own family, and a single photograph was now the crime that destroyed us? I bit back the urge to laugh. That night, I couldn't stop scrolling. Each new comment, each new share was fuel. I dug deeper, pulling out old albums, photo archives, even my parents' Facebook posts. I began assembling a record, not just one cruel birthday, but a lifetime of imbalance. My 16th birthday, forgotten entirely, no cake, no party. Isabella's sweet 16, a rented ballroom, a DJ, a designer gown. My college graduation, they showed up late, left early, muttered, "Good job," as if I'd picked up groceries. Isabella's graduation, champagne brunch, custom banners, family photos professionally framed. The evidence piled up, damning and undeniable. I crafted another collage, side by side, Isabella's grand celebrations versus my hollow milestones. I added captions with dates, receipts, and even bank transfers when I found them. This wasn't an emotional rant anymore, it was a case study. It was an indictment. The internet responded in kind. Local blogs picked it up, spinning headlines about toxic favoritism and family inequality exposed. A family psychology podcast even invited me for an interview, though I wasn't ready to speak publicly yet. The raw images said more than words ever could. Meanwhile, the fallout hit home. My father's colleagues began teasing him in the office. My mother's book club dissected the photos like they were forensic evidence, debating if they'd ever unconsciously favored their own children. Isabella, usually glued to her Instagram, went silent. Her once daily stream of lifestyle posts and motivational quotes evaporated overnight. For someone whose identity thrived on curated perfection, silence was a confession louder than words. But the most unsettling reaction wasn't from friends, co-workers, or strangers online. It came from my grandmother, Margaret Mercer, the matriarch of our family, respected, wealthy, and feared in equal measure. She had always played the peacekeeper, smoothing conflicts, insisting that family unity came before pride. Yet when she called me late that night, her voice wasn't soothing, it was sharp, steely, and shaking with restrained rage, not at me, but at her own son and daughter-in-law. "I've seen enough, Daniel," she said, her tone like a judge delivering a verdict. "For years I convinced myself your parents were just busy, that they loved you equally but showed it differently. But the evidence—" She trailed off, her breath trembling. "The evidence is undeniable. This ends now." I sat, frozen, the phone slick in my hands. Grandma Margaret had always been the immovable rock of our family, the one everyone deferred to. If she was taking my side, the entire balance of power was about to shift. And then she told me something that made my stomach lurch. She was rewriting her will, not splitting it evenly as my parents had always assumed. Not leaving her estate in their hands to divide fairly. She was leaving everything directly to me, a generational correction for decades of imbalance. When that news broke, it wouldn't just be favoritism exposed, it would be war. The fallout from Grandma Margaret's decision spread through the family like wildfire. Within 2 days, everyone knew the Mercer estate, her historic house, the trust accounts, the investments, was no longer destined to flow through my parents and eventually be split between Isabella and me. It was mine directly. And it wasn't just gossip. Grandma had already met with her attorney, drafted a notarized letter of intent, and updated the legal documents. She left no room for debate. The family group chat, usually a dead zone of recipe swaps and holiday plans, lit up like a courtroom drama. My parents didn't confront me right away. Instead, Isabella appeared first, standing at my apartment door one rainy evening, mascara streaked down her cheeks, shoulders trembling. "I never realized how bad it was for you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought you just preferred smaller celebrations. I thought it was your choice." For a fleeting second I believed her. The tears seemed real, but then she shifted, her voice softening into something practiced. "Daniel, about Grandma's will, maybe we can talk to her together, convince her to reconsider?" "I don't want you to feel invisible anymore, I swear, but cutting me out completely, it isn't fair either." Her words twisted the knife. Even in her apology, the focus was on what she stood to lose. I saw it in her eyes, not a plea for my healing, but desperation to protect the privileged pedestal she'd always stood on. "I'm not interested in fairness measured by inheritance," I told her. "I just wanted acknowledgement, for once." Her lips pressed into a thin line, the softness evaporated. She left without another word, heels striking the hallway like gunshots. The next confrontation came from my parents. They summoned me to the family home, the same dining room where the cruel birthday card had been given. Richard sat stiff at the head of the table, his voice low, rehearsed. "This was all a miscommunication, Daniel. We may not always show it, but we love you. Maybe we should all try therapy. Rebuild." Elaine, however, couldn't contain herself. "You've humiliated us in front of everyone we know. Do you have any idea how this looks? You've painted us as monsters when all we did was love you differently." "Differently?" I echoed, my chest tightening. "You mean less." Her face flushed crimson. She spat back that I was vindictive, obsessed with dragging the family name through mud for attention. Richard raised a hand, trying to calm her, then turned to me. "Son, you can't solve family issues on the internet. This campaign of yours, it's excessive. You should have come to us privately." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Privately? I had spent my entire life raising concerns privately, only to be brushed aside. The internet wasn't revenge. It was the only courtroom where the truth could no longer be ignored. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A notification, then another, then dozens more. My latest collage had been picked up by a national news site under the headline, "Family Favoritism Exposed. Viral Photos Show How Inequality Shapes Generations." It was no longer a family matter. It was a cultural conversation. Parents across the country debated it on morning talk shows. Therapists cited it in blogs. Hashtags like family truth and favorite child trended for days. I looked across the table at Elaine and Richard. Their world of control, of appearances, of reputations, was collapsing under the weight of their own actions. And I hadn't said a word more than necessary. By the time the national media had their hands on my story, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. I had become the unintentional face of family favoritism exposed. Strangers messaged me daily with their own horror stories, siblings who inherited everything, children overlooked for years, parents who weaponized love like currency. It was overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. I wasn't alone anymore. At work, I braced for the worst. I imagined hushed whispers in the office kitchen, colleagues doubting my professionalism. Instead, my boss called me in, her expression unreadable. I sat down, heart pounding. "Daniel," she began, sliding her laptop around to show my viral collage on a marketing blog. Our digital team thinks you've got a rare instinct, the clarity, the storytelling, the way you captured attention. It's what agencies pay millions for. We want you leading strategy on a new campaign. I blinked. A promotion, a salary bump, relocation options. My parents' neglect had inadvertently launched the career leap I'd been chasing for years. The irony stung, but I accepted. For once, the imbalance had turned in my favor. But success came with new shadows. An email arrived from a family law attorney, not mine, but one sympathetic to my case. She warned me, be prepared. If your parents feel threatened by the inheritance shift, they may try to contest your grandmother's will. Claims of undue influence, manipulation, or mental instability are common tactics. I forwarded the message to Grandma Margaret. Her reply was swift and scathing. Let them try. My attorney has records, and my mind is sharper than theirs combined. They won't win. Even at 83, her fire was unmatched. Then came a call I hadn't expected. Uncle Thomas, my father's estranged younger brother. He lived 3 states away, rarely seen except at funerals or holidays. His voice was calm, almost mournful. Daniel, I know what you're going through. Richard was always the favored son. I was the extra, the disappointment. Our father did to me what Richard is doing to you. I spent years in therapy to understand it. They won't change easily. They'll deny, then rage, then bargain. And when all else fails, they'll try to win you back with empty gestures. Don't fall for it. Document everything. Protect yourself. His prediction came true sooner than I thought. 2 weeks later, Elaine and Richard showed up at my apartment unannounced. They wore forced smiles, carrying a crisp white envelope. Inside was a check for $15,000, the exact amount they had spent on Isabella's Rolex. Alongside it, a letter. The letter was a masterclass in avoidance. We regret that you felt neglected. We never intended to make you feel less loved. We promise to be more mindful of your sensitivities. Not once did they admit fault. It wasn't an apology, it was damage control. I slid the envelope back across the table, unopened. This isn't about money. It never was. Elaine's mask cracked first. Her voice rose, trembling with anger. Then what do you want, Daniel? What will make this stop? I looked at them both, my voice steady. Acknowledgment. The truth. Richard tried to smooth things over, his tone paternal. Families aren't perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Why couldn't you come to us privately instead of this circus? I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. If Isabella had posted those photos instead of me, what would your reaction have been? Silence. A silence so long and so damning it filled the room like smoke. Finally they stood. Elaine's face was rigid, Richard's jaw tight. Without another word, they left the envelope behind. For the first time in my life, I realized I had cornered them with nothing but the truth. And yet, something in me knew. This battle wasn't over. The silence after that confrontation was deafening. Days stretched into weeks with no word from my parents. For a moment, I thought maybe they had accepted defeat, retreating into their country club circles to lick their wounds. But the Mercer family never surrenders quietly. It was Isabella who resurfaced first. She asked to meet at a cafe, far from our neighborhood, away from familiar eyes. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The designer sheen was gone, no flawless makeup, no curated confidence. She looked ordinary, fragile. Daniel, she began, her voice low, I know I've been blind. I see it now. I want to change. For a moment I believed her, but then came the real reason she'd sought me out. What if we worked together, took this experience and turned it into something good? We could start an organization, speak publicly, help families avoid favoritism, but She hesitated, eyes darting to the window. I can't publicly admit everything. It would ruin me. Even now, even in her supposed enlightenment, Isabella was still bargaining to protect herself. She wanted the redemption story without the sacrifice of truth. I pushed my coffee aside, the bitterness in my chest sharper than the drink. I don't need a business partner, I said. I needed a sister, and you couldn't be that when it mattered most. Her eyes glistened, but no words came. She stood, leaving behind nothing but the faint perfume of someone who had always lived for appearances. 6 months passed. My life shifted in ways I could never have imagined. The promotion at work was real, and I relocated to a new city. I rented a modest apartment overlooking the river, bought furniture with my own money, and for the first time in my adult life, every choice was mine. No comparisons, no measuring up. Just freedom. Back home, the Mercers were unraveling. Grandma Margaret never reversed her will. She told me with a glint of pride in her eye, "I'm correcting what I should have years ago." She had stopped attending family dinners, stopped pretending, and her absence at those events was louder than any speech. Elaine and Richard, under mounting social pressure, started seeing a therapist. But from what my Uncle Thomas told me, they spent most sessions griping about rebuilding their reputation rather than examining their parenting. A concern wasn't about me, it was about saving face. Isabella eventually started therapy too, though quietly, without announcement. I heard through mutual friends that she was finally confronting the weight of being the perfect daughter. The pressure, the performance, the strings attached to every gift. Maybe someday she'd find her own truth. But it wouldn't be with my help. As for me, I kept the birthday card, not because I wanted to relive the cruelty, but because it was proof, a tangible reminder that sometimes the smallest weapons cut the deepest. A cupcake, a careless joke, a lifetime of imbalance crystallized into one humiliating moment. And yet, that moment gave me something I had been denied for years: clarity. People sometimes ask if I regret it, going public, airing family wounds for the world to see. I don't. I spent 29 years swallowing my pain in silence, waiting for them to notice, waiting for change that never came. The only regret I carry is waiting so long to demand respect. The Mercer family's reputation may never recover, but I have. And the truth, my truth, was never meant to be quiet. Sometimes it takes just one photograph, one spark of courage, to burn through decades of lies.